Hi everybody. Let's talk about CCS. With nearly 7 billion people on our planet who produce and use energy, we produce around 36 billion tons per year of CO2, belonging to greenhouse gases and contribute to global warming. The goal of the new international regulation is a maximum of 2 degrees Celsius increase in the average temperature by 2050. One way to limit CO2 emissions would be the CCS. CCS standing for CO2 capture and storage. It represents CO2 capture instead of its release in order to store it underground. The first step of the CCS is the capture. But how can we carry out this? We will avoid CO2 emissions by means of one of these methods. In the post-combustion capture, CO2 is separated from flue gas to avoid its release, usually through an absorption process. In the combustion capture, oxygen is used as oxidizing agent instead of air to produce mainly steam and CO2 as flue gas, which can be easily separated by steam condensation. In the pre-combustion capture, hydrogen, obtained from syngas, is separated from CO2 and used as a fuel to produce only nitrogen and water in its combustion. After the capture, CO2 is transported to storage via pipes and ships in order to be stored. But what are the most recognized ways of CO2 storage? Saline aquifers are geological formations sufficiently porous and often permeable. They are located at huge depths, and they represent the greatest potential for storage capacity, up to 10,000 gigatons of CO2. They are widely available on the globe's surface, but they still need to be explored in order to check their potential to trap CO2 over the long term. The next one is depleted oil and gas reservoir. It is the most popular CO2 sequestering way in industry. CO2 injection into oil fields is today the most logical storage place. In addition, extra oil could be recovered after the injection. Last but not least, let's talk about coal seams. After its injection in the seams, CO2 is fixed on the surface of the coal. Then it becomes immobilized by an adsorption phenomenon. Coal can contain twice as much CO2 as methane. It is possible to plan to store CO2 in the coal while recovering the methane released, which can be sold. You might have some questions to ask now.
Est-ce que la technologie CCS est une technologie risquée?
No, it is not. Zones where CO2 will be stored are carefully studied prior to operation in order to detect any risk related to earthquakes. Studies, especially in Japan, have shown that there are no induced links between CO2 storage and the seismic activity of an area.
Adakah CCS ialah teknologi yang berdaya maju?
Yes, it is. The capture of CO2 is already a routine practice in some industries. 17 CO2 storage facilities are currently working worldwide. For instance, the Statoil project, Sleipner, is the longest-running CO2 storage project in the world, operating since 1996 and injecting over 1 million tons of CO2 every year.
¿Podría esta tecnología mejorar la calidad del aire?
CO2 is not an air pollutant like CO, NOx, hydrocarbons, soot and so on. However, CO2 is associated with global pollution, which concerns the global warming. Thanks to CCS, this kind of pollution will be mitigated, and therefore the global warming as well.
هل CCS يقدر يلوث الماء تحت الأرض؟
If precautions have been taken, it couldn't. Storage sites are carefully chosen through studies to prove that CO2 is safely trapped and it won't be in contact with drinking water. In addition, after CO2 injection, monitoring is carried out in the subsurface, the soil and the atmosphere around the geological formations, to assure that CO2 is permanently locked and to know where it is accumulated.
How many tons of CO2 emission should be stored in order to achieve the 2 degrees global warming by 2050?
CCS will need to contribute nearly 1/5 of emissions reductions across both power and industrial sectors. According to the experts, by 2050, CCS could reduce 95 billion tons of CO2. Currently, 0.05 billion tons of CO2 have been stored. In order to reach the 2 degrees Celsius global warming target, this figure must be multiplied by 2,000. Maybe you are still not convinced? Let's listen to Isabel Chernyshkovsky, a geological expert working on CCS at the BRGM, the French Geological Survey.
I am Isabelle Czerniowski from BRGM, the French Geological Survey. I am the President Emeritus of the CO2 GeoNet European Network of Excellence on CO2 geological storage, and I've been working on CO2 storage since 1993, the first European research project on this topic. CO2 capture and storage, which is the CCS technology, is increasingly recognized as the key climate change mitigation technology. CCS is about putting back into the underground the carbon that was extracted from the underground in the form of oil, gas and coal for our energy needs. And this makes a lot of sense. Technically, it is feasible to now deploy progressively CCS in the world, but the socio-economic conditions are not yet met. For instance, in Europe, the CO2 price in the emission trading scheme is too low to enable CCS to be deployed. We need other incentives. The incentives that are needed to progressively deploy the CCS technology in the world might develop soon as a result of the Paris Climate Agreement. Meanwhile, scientists, as we are, go on to carry out research to decrease the cost and increase the efficiency of the technology. And also our role is to better inform policymakers and citizens about this technology and about its key role for mitigating climate change.